joined the meeting.
I seem to have had a notification that we're streaming. I don't know that that's accurate, but in case it is, I will welcome everybody to tonight's Health, Adult and Social Services Scrutiny panel. Slightly different again this evening because we are meeting virtually as necessary by the made necessary by the pandemic, and I hope you're all keeping safe and well in these very strange times. We are doing this meeting via Zoom, and it's the first time that we're using this particular software, and I have to warn you that I am not proficient in it. So any errors that occur during the course of this meeting are most likely, and indeed probably entirely, my fault. But we will try our best and see how we go. We have a fairly comprehensive agenda. We're still waiting for a couple of councillors to join us, but I'm going to take care of some of the housekeeping. And because they're on calls currently, they can join us when those calls have finished. I haven't been made aware of any apologies for absence on behalf of councillors, unless any of my colleagues have any. Although it seems like everyone else is on mute at the moment. You're all behaving yourselves, which is excellent. So I don't think there are any other apologies for absence. I'm not aware that there are any urgent matters. Does anyone have any declarations of interest they need to make?
Yes, Chair.
Go ahead, Alan. Yeah.
I'm a member of Health Watch, so for the 2 articles at the end. Thank you.
Excellent. We'll bear that in mind. Councillor Burke, do you need to make the one? Yes, I was going to say.
Just so in case it comes up, non-exec director at Hillingdon Hospital, should anything come up about that.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Does anyone else, because I can see some of you, but not all of you. If anyone else has one, please do let me know now, and I will come to you. No? Lovely. I'm not aware that there are any matters to be considered in private. The next item is the minutes of the 6th of October. They're on pages 5 to 12 of your agenda pack. Does anybody have a problem? Not a problem. Does anybody have anything that's incorrect in the minutes? Anything they'd like to speak about? Were you misquoted in our minutes? No, fabulous. Can I ask that we approve those minutes then as a true and correct record of that meeting?
Agreed.
Thank you. That's lovely. Right, that was a lot quicker than I expected. Now, the first, I don't know how long that sort of speed is going to continue for, but we'll see. The first item of business this evening is a review of Colette House. And I'm not sure which of our officers and colleagues is going to lead off on this. I would just say from the outset that this is obviously a very tragic incident that precipitated this review some time ago. Members may well remember that. What I need to ask panel members and people participating in the discussion tonight is if we can keep questions related to this specific report, because colleagues who will need to answer questions will have limited purview in terms of what they can say and how they can answer. And we can, of course, take up wider ranging questions with me via email or yourselves individually via email after the meeting. But the purpose, as I understand it this evening, is to look at the recommendations that have been made, to examine what progress has been made to meeting those recommendations, and to ask questions of responsible officers. Kerry, I'm sort of looking in your direction as to whether you would like to start this off. That may be entirely erroneous of me, but...
No, that's correct, Councillor Crawford. Thank you and good evening, everybody. Are you happy for me to start now, Councillor Crawford?
By all means.
Thank you. So the report today to the committees with regard to the tragic death of Jenny Foote, who died at Collette House in 2015 at the hands of one of the patients who was staying at Collette House. NHS England has completed a report into the care provided to the patient responsible for the tragic death of Jenny. The review made 6 recommendations for partner agencies, and the report tonight talks through the recommendations relating to the council, which was 1 recommendation of the 6. I think it's important to recognise that the families of Jenny Foote and Mr Z have both been involved in reviewing the investigation of the treatment of Mr Z, and that the family of Jenny Foote have agreed that her name can be used publicly. Of part of the presentation of this report, members of the committee will want to recognise, hopefully want to recognise, the tragic loss of Jenny Foote to her friends and family. Just to give some background in terms of the number of people that we support with mental health needs in Ealing via the council, that we currently are supporting 340 customers with mental health needs who have got assessed eligible needs under the Care Act. Total spend within this area is over £11 million a year, of which £5 million is spent to support people in independent supported living units within the community, and over £6 million is spent on supporting people within care homes. The council either provides or procures services to meet the needs of people with eligible needs in line with the 2014 Care Act, and where appropriate, the council joint commission services with the CCG. This is especially pertinent where customers are joint funded through 117 aftercare duties. The council also directly provides some services for people with mental health needs at Community Road Hostel and at group homes for people with mental health needs. However, the majority of services are commissioned from the not-for-profit or the for-profit sector. In terms of the investigation that NHS England carried out into the care for Mr Z, it is noted that on July the 27th, 2015, Jenny Foote, who was a member at Collette House, a hostel for people with mental health needs, was killed by a resident who's referred to in the report as Mr Z. NHS England commissioned an independent investigation into the care and treatment of the mental health service user Mr Z. So just to be clear, this is the report looked at the care for Mr Z rather than the circumstances around the death of Jenny. The independent investigation followed the NHS England Serious Incident Framework, and the main purpose of the independent investigation is to ensure that mental health care relating to homicides are investigated in such a way that lessons can be learned to effectively prevent recurrence. The underlying aim is to identify common risks and opportunities to improve patient care and safety. Of the 6 recommendations made by the independent investigator, 1 relates to commissioners of services provided by Collette House, which is Ealing Council and Ealing CCG, and my apologies for my dog. The recommendation, which is recommendation 6 in the report, recommends that in partnership with London Cyrenians Housing, who are the provider, the commissioners of Collette House should clearly clarify the role and nature of Collette House service provision, including the limits of the service and clear thresholds for raising and escalating any concerns. These are included in Appendix 1 of the report, and the update is that the eligibility criteria were reviewed in 2017 and new criteria were adopted, and that we've produced an updated escalation process between the council and the CCG. The report, which is in the Appendix 1, talks through a range of reviews that were carried out by council and CCG officers to look at the services offered through Collette House. In terms of the recommendations, there were no additional recommendations in terms of the eligibility and the exclusion criteria of the service, but there are some actions in terms of working more closely with the provider to encourage residents to step down into lower supported accommodation and to promote more independent living. That's essentially the oversight of the report, Chair. As to open up to questions now, if that's okay.
Sure. Thank you, Kerry. So I think the first thing I would want to say, just in response, I didn't do it at the start, and I should do, is that we'd like to put on record as a committee our record our condolences to the family, Jenny Foote and her friend. Salute
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Cordier, and salute the courage and bravery of her family and friends in allowing her name to be put forward, and how they've handled the aftermath of these very tragic events. So what I'd like to do is ask members of the panel if they have questions, and to do as Councillor Cordier is doing, and if I can't see you or I don't recognise you, please shout. Yes, yeah, Councillor Cordier, I'm coming to you. Go for it.
Okay.
Go on, Councillor Cordier. You want a question?
Yes, yeah, I have.
You ask it now?
Yeah.
Good.
Stevens, I read this recommendations on this report, and I found there are a couple of things are missing, according to my understanding. If probably you can really clarify. On page 2, well, although we don't have reports in front of us, but I have made a couple of notes. On page 2, the paragraph stating the underlying aim is to identify risks and opportunities to improve patient safety. I think there must be the local procedure for the safety of staff also. In offices, mostly, we have lone working policies where they have informed the officers or the staff members that if they are working late in the office, there should be someone with them. They shouldn't be working alone. So this is the care home where other people are present. Is it the same policy apply?
Oh, Kerry, would you like to come in? I'm just waiting for Kerry to come back, Councillor, and then I'll come back to you.
That is question 1. I've got more questions, Chair, if I may.
Okay.
Or shall I?
Can I just ask how many questions there are, Councillor Cordier?
I've got, I think, about 3.
Okay. Why don't I just get Kerry to answer them individually?
Right. Okay.
For the moment, because otherwise he might not be able to provide the detail that that we need. It's important to know that Kerry didn't write this report that he's responding to tonight. Yeah. So, Kerry, would you like to take that first one for me?
The Commissioner has written this report here. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you for the question. Staff safety across the council and within partner agencies is a paramount area of work for us. We're currently working with the corporate health and safety team to look at support models for staff that are alone working within the community or within council properties and sites. We have strong protocols in place with our council-run services to ensure that we minimise all risk to staff and customers where possible. In terms of the lessons learned from the Colette House incident, the escalation and eligibility protocols were changed a number of years ago, and the review and the recommendations reflect that these were some significant steps to make staff at Colette House safe in terms of how which customers are able to use the service. Did that answer the question, Councillor Dear?
Sort of, yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
So, sorry, Ian Robinson from the CCG.
Mr. Robinson, yes,
to what
please.
Kerry has said. I think it's important to say that this is a independent provider. It's not the council or the CCG, and they have their own health and safety requirements and obligations. And this is still subject to a health and safety executive investigation that is not published yet. So I think
Alright.
I think we need to be careful about how much we comment on the individual circumstances
Sure.
within Colette House.
All right.
So we'll bear that in mind. Councillor Cordier, you had some other questions. Would you like to ask those now?
I have indeed. Probably Kerry won't be able to answer. I will try anyway. Doesn't matter.
Let's see.
Probably
Let's find out, shall we?
they can make a note. Probably they can make a note.
Yes.
On page 22, Kerry, the paragraph starts with the placements are not reviewed frequently enough by London Borough of Ealing plus ECCG. Not all residents have care coordinators active in supporting Move On. I am a bit shocked when I read this. If we are placing people who are diagnosed with schizophrenia, with other mental health diagnoses, section 117 they are on, 37 and 41, which mental health as well as their criminal activities, they are known. People, residents who are on section 37 and 41, they are known to forensic teams. But residents who are under section 117, they got clear diagnosis. How could they not have a care coordinators? I was wondering who's reviewing their cases. If they must be on medication, if they got serious diagnosis, there must be a psychiatrist involved. How do they review their care plans? I'm a bit shocked. I think we need to think about or to do something about these questions. And how can they review? The further on they stated, I'll come back to the other question that is related to.
Cool. Let's try this one first. I don't know how much Kerry is able to answer, but let's see.
Okay.
Kerry, so I'll start with you, Kerry, and then we'll go to other colleagues if need be.
Thank you, Councillor Crawford. This may be a question that's better answered by colleagues from the Mental Health Trust.
Sure.
Well, yes, yeah.
Yeah. So, Parminder, sorry, I missed your hand before. Parminder, would you like to take this one? Sure.
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of Colette House, we have residents there from our trust and we are responsible for them. But as you can see in the report, not all of those residents are ours. And I guess it's about thinking about who is on what. Not everybody in there would be on under the same section. And I can't tell you how many are under what section. But all of the people.
67% the people are there of got a diagnosis of schizophrenia.
Yeah, so not everybody who has the diagnosis of schizophrenia would have been on a section. So I think it's about understanding that. But I think in terms of the patients that are under our service, so that's West London NHS Trust, they are care coordinated and they're offered support with the forensic outreach service from the ones that we have. And I think that is in the report. It does say, I think there's 2 out of the 4 that are care coordinated are under the forensic outreach service. But I wanted to go back on your initial question about lone working. So I can only speak of my trust, but one of the recommendations, and it was part of the bigger recommendation that Kerry was talking about, and it was to do with risk assessment. So every patient that we transfer there is risk assessed, and it's using a tool which is called the HCR20. And what that looks at is the history of violence. So every single patient that's transferred there from our service is assessed under this HCR20, and then thereafter they're reviewed every after 3 months. And our lone working policy, because we have workers in the community, that was reviewed in light of this report as well. But as I said, that's only for my trust, and I can't comment on the rest. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda.
Mr. Robinson, your hand was still up. I don't know if that's from the last time or whether you wanted to come in again. And you're also on mute, I think. Sorry.
Yeah, it's my first time today. It's the fresh hand. Just to add to what was being said, everyone who is placed in Colette House is funded under section 117 aftercare, and is jointly funded by the CCG and the local authority.
That's what I understood. Yeah.
Hold on, Councillor Cordier. Let Mr. Robinson finish if he needs to.
Everyone is linked to the local recovery service. Some may not have a named care coordinator, but that doesn't mean they don't have access to the support from that service. Kerry has put in a strong and robust review process for anybody who's funded under Section 117, and there's a programme of activity that is going on to ensure that people are appropriately placed within that situation.
Okay, just on this point, is there anything anyone else would like to add? Hold on, Councillor Cordier. I just want to see if any officers would like to add anything before I move on to the final question.
Yeah.
But I'm not seeing anybody suggesting that they would. So you've got a final question, Councillor Cordier, which we didn't get to before.
Right. Final question. Thank you very much, Chair. On page 24. It states all residents have doses boxes in their flats. Residents are supervised to take their medication by staff unless there's been agreement from their clinical team to self-medicate. I understand that nobody can force anyone to take medication. If we are saying the people, mostly they have a mental illness, they got a diagnosis, and the medication is kept in their rooms, and the staff is only monitoring that they can take medication. I have seen people, they don't take medication. So it is a bit difficult. If they don't, there must be some residents can be on oral medication, some can be on depot. So I believe there must be a care coordinator or someone who is prescribing these medicines. GP just prescribe according to psychiatrist's review plan. So I was wondering if the residents are left alone on their own devices to take their medication, they might not be complying with their medication. I was wondering, really, so who is monitoring all these issues in this residential care home? Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you. That was my last question. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Councillor Cordier. I don't know, Kerry, would you like to start?
Come in first and then pass to colleagues.
Sure.
Firstly, this is just to be clear, this isn't a residential home. Effectively, it's a hostel where people have limited tenancies rather than being residential. Councillor Cordier.
I'm still sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. And just to say as well that obviously we work to promote independence with our customer and patient groups, and will support people to take medication directly themselves where possible. This is something that we will promote and risk manage in close partnership, working with NHS colleagues. Parminder or Ian may wish to come in at this point.
Yeah, or both of them. Parminder, you've got your hand up first. Go for it.
No, I was just going to say, in terms of medication, it's all going on to what Kerry's saying. It's about the recovery approach and using that to promote people's independence. So, and that's what the Colette House is. It's not residential. It's not home for life as such. It's about trying to get people back into the community and promoting independence. And I suppose it's about risk assessing and also doing positive risk taking with people. So if there is a risk, that's monitored carefully, and it's not just people are left to their own devices. That's never the case that I'm aware of. So I just wanted to mention that it is about positive risk taking and doing promoting independence.
Ian, would you like to add anything at this point?
Just to confirm, it's not a residential care home. It's not regulated. It's not able to administer medication, and therefore it is up to the individuals to take their own medication.
Sure.
And we're not in a situation where we can force someone to have medication in that situation.
No, but just to clarify, it is entirely appropriate that people will monitor how those individuals are doing, and you know, can ascertain whether there is a problem that requires further observation or action, isn't it? I mean, that doesn't, none of that's precluded by what you have to do, is it? No.
Chair, can I come
yes.
in there?
Yeah. Please.
Yeah, so, for those who don't know, I'm Dr. Taylor, I'm the Vice Chair for Eden CCG. I think what helps to facilitate this is the fact that these residents all have DOSIT boxes. These to facilitate the compliance of their medication, but also helps to support the staff in terms of determining whether the clients are actually taking their medication. But like Ian says, this is not a CQC regulated activity. None of the clients, and that is actually a exclusion criteria for Colette House, that anyone that requires CQC regulated activities should not be placed in Colette House. So, you know, you're absolutely right, Councillor, in terms of compliance is really important when it comes to mental health patients, because if they do become non-compliant to medication, they are at a greater risk of relapsing. So you're absolutely right in terms of it's important that there is some level of oversight in terms of making sure that the clients are taking their medication. But you know, this is about supporting independent living, and you know, these clients are they are in the community because they are in that transition from being in supported living and to being in either unsupported living or less supported living, and that's what we're trying to achieve with Colette House and the provider.
So it's about a pathway for them to potentially come back into the wider community, isn't it? As best as I understand it. Right, I have
Chair.
Hello, Councillor Cordier.
Chair, last little question to Vijay, please. Little.
Okay, we'll see if Vijay can answer. Go for it, Councillor Cordier.
Yeah, Vijay, if you are saying that medication is compliance is necessary for people who are under mental health criteria, would you say that these patients, some patients, not all, understand that under section 117, they must be under one of the psychiatrists or who is reviewing their cases, and there should be a care coordinator too who is reviewing their cases as a multidisciplinary team.
So not necessarily, because patients with enduring mental illness like schizophrenia can be what we would term stable in the community, and they don't require active secondary care psychiatric ongoing monitoring and surveillance, because a lot of these patients with chronic schizophrenia are managed in the community primarily by their GP practice, who will be prescribing their medication and also doing their annual mental health reviews and any other quarterly reviews that client or patient would require. So there will be a large cohort of those that do not require acute psychiatric community surveillance and monitoring, and that's not unusual. But you will find that sometimes even those patients may potentially relapse. You know, patients with schizophrenia can relapse, we know, and one factor to that could potentially be non-compliance to medication. But that could happen to any schizophrenic patient in the community. That is not pertinent just to Colette House. So that will happen to anyone in any situation like this.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you. I think Dr. Taylor and colleagues have already outlined that just because this is not a regulated home in the way that others are, it doesn't mean that the care of these patients is not meticulously monitored, and that they can't, and that people, the relevant individuals, can't be alerted if there's a problem. Because to me, that's the striking thing from this report, and that's the thing that we're looking to correct. But I appreciate your questions, Councillor Cordier. Right, I have two more contributions being signalled to me. Councillor Burke and then Alan Cook. So I'm going to go to Councillor Burke first. If that's okay.
Forgive me if you can't answer this, because from what I understood, there are some things that you can't talk about. I was just wanting to ask, really, in terms of the review itself, if I've read the report correctly, a visit didn't take place because of COVID. And really, it's how do we as a committee in some ways get assurance that the reviewers are convinced that the documentation for something that was as serious as this is a good enough way of knowing what's going on. And then I suppose secondly, in terms of ongoing monitoring, whether it's in us as a commissioner or whoever's doing it, that therefore there's that assurance, you know, in terms of all the things that are happening since. Totally appreciate the COVID difficulties, but as I say, given the seriousness of this incident, it's about how we can be confident we have the assurance when actually, as far as I can gather, nobody's actually seen anything.
I think it's a reasonable question. I'm going to see if Kerry wants to start, and then we'll go to other colleagues if necessary.
Thank you, Councillor. It's an absolutely valid question, and obviously COVID's causing significant issues in terms of how we are speaking to and engaging with partner provider organisations. We're looking at more regular contacts with providers across the piece, and during COVID, we've been having much more regular contacts with providers, albeit virtually. But it's an absolutely valid question to ask, Councillor. In terms of the recommendations within the report that were relevant to the Council and the CCG, they were clearly linked to the commissioning arrangements that we have with Colette House. The report that was carried out on behalf of NHS England has been ongoing for a number of years now. So there's been lots of contact during the time with the provider, during that time with the provider, but effectively this is a commissioning review in terms of our commissioning arrangements with Colette House, rather than the review of the service provided directly by the organisation.
Sure. Would any other colleagues want to comment at this point? Parminder, I don't know if your hand's quite up or if yes.
Yeah, it was just to highlight that with the report came the recommendations, and we have to evidence that we've completed those recommendations or actioned them or the progress that we've made. So we have done that in our trust in terms of where they're going, and they are forwarded upwards. I'm not sure exactly the governance of them, and I don't know if others would be able to say. I think it's probably the CCG that we have to report to in terms of whether we've completed those actions or not. And I'm sure they will be asked of us from the commissioning reviewers.
Can I come back?
Yes, please.
Is that okay?
Councillor Burke, yeah.
So would it be reasonable because you obviously, as the trust, do have CQC looking at you?
Lovely Jojo.
Tim, I think it might be you, Mike.
Yeah, Tim's not on mute anymore. Anyway, carry on, Councillor Burke.
So is it reasonable, and it's okay if it's not, that we as the Commissioner, through those organisations that are monitored by CQC, actually, you know, just keep an eye on that or get a report back at some point? Because you obviously do have a responsibility for physically monitoring this, and that would give us that extra level of assurance.
So I can go back to the trust and I can confirm what the arrangements are and how that can be shared.
And we can schedule an update to this item, maybe say in a year's time, to look at the deliverability of what's been set out in this report and progress. We can have that as a recommendation of our discussions this evening if the committee is so minded. I don't think anyone would be against a sort of progress check on how we're doing. That might be a very worthwhile step. Councillor Burke, did you have anything else? Do you feel all of your queries are answered? Yeah, okay, lovely. Ian, did you want to come in? Sorry, did I miss you?
Yeah, just very quickly, just to echo Kerry's point about it's only during COVID that we've not been having the regular contact and visits, and we are talking a number of years now. And even during COVID, the recovery teams and from the trust are also in regular contact with the patients who are in Colette House, plus the placements team will be in regular contact with Colette House around any issues that might be being raised. So it isn't that there aren't any contacts going on, it's more that they may have been
it's the nature of those contacts at the moment. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think the key thing to emphasise here is that a lot of the work has already taken place prior to the COVID outbreak, hasn't it? And that because this report spans a period of time, and there's been a period of time where providers, commissioners and ourselves have been waiting for the final report to be made available. So no, I think that absolutely bears emphasising. Right, I'm going to go to Alan Cook, who's been waiting patiently. Alan, are you ready?
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Fantastic.
A couple of questions. One, why have only 50% of the residents got care coordinators? What about the other 50%? And the second question, we've talked a lot tonight about people moving on and becoming independent living. One of the issues is that looking at this report, there are at least 3 residents of Colette House that have been there for 5 years, 4 residents that have been there for 2 to 4 years. So that's not moving on very swiftly. Why is it taking so long? And the other point that it also raises within the report is that there appears to be a lack of activities, education, and training. And only one person prior to COVID was actually involved in that. Now, whether that is because it's the way the report is written or not, I don't know. So those are my 2 questions.
So should we start with the first question about the percentages? I don't know who, well, actually, let me see if Kerry, is there anything you wanted to, can you add anything to kick us off?
If I can take the second 2 questions first, if that's okay, Chair.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Thank you, and thank you for the questions. The move on issues, an absolutely correct concern to be raising, Mr. Cook, with regard to opportunities for people to move to more independent living. As you're aware, there's significant challenges in terms of finding suitable housing accommodation within the borough, and we're working closely with colleagues in the housing department and elsewhere, such as RSLs, residential social landlords, to find a suitable accommodation for people. This is an area of significant focus for us within the council and in partnership with NHS colleagues to look to find alternative accommodation, because it's not suitable for people to be in these placements for more than the maximum of 2 years. It suggests that the placements aren't promoting the independence and the move on opportunities for individuals. In terms of the activities and educational opportunities, I think it's right and proper that you raised that question, Mr. Cook, and that the report has raised this as an area of concern and an area of focus for us going forward from a council perspective, that we're providing opportunities for people to access education and daytime activities. Chair, I think I'll probably have to leave the care co question to colleagues from the trust.
Yeah, just before we move on, I did want to pick up on that education, training and the sort of wider personal development point of the patients here. I realise we might be extrapolating out from some old data, but is that data cognizant with our own understanding of the current situation, or would we say things have moved on? Is there someone who can speak to that?
I can speak to that, Chair, and just to say, I think that the report was completed during COVID, and obviously there are impacts on people's abilities to access community services and community resources during the time that the report was pulled together. This is our report, not the overarching report carried out by NHSE, but it's certainly something we're looking at currently, and the developments with the trust around more focused services upon the Mint model will support that.
So, I mean, if we are, and I'm minded to take Councillor Burke's suggestion that we take a progress report on this at a future date, if we are going to do that, perhaps we could include an item or some paragraphs about how those services are progressing and the progress of those patients with regard to education and personal development.
And move on, Councillor Crawford. I think it'd be useful.
Of course.
To look at what move on arrangements have been.
That would be great. I don't know which colleagues would like to take the second point. Parminder, Ian,
Councillor Crawford,
in your direction.
Could I just come in on the education part? I think we just have to be clear that there are a number of services in the borough providing training, education, daytime opportunities. It's a little bit like the medication side. They're available and we can encourage people to go to them. We can't force
mandate them to do it. Yeah.
And I think that has to be taken into account as well. I think we need to work better with our providers, such as Sarina's Colette House, in order to work with them in terms of positive activities. But again, engagement is not something that can be easily activated.
No, it's probably how you encourage those individuals, the methods you use to help them access those activities. Exactly. Those should be kept under review, I guess. That's where I would be suggesting the focus is. Sorry, Parminder, did you want to come in as well?
Just in terms of the care coordinator, I'm afraid I'm not able to answer that. I'm not sure what, why. I can't tell you why this half people don't have and the other half do.
Is there somebody we could write to? Is there somebody could we coordinate that as a follow-up from this meeting?
Councillor Crawford, it's Chris Hilton.
Hello, Chris. Yes, go ahead.
Here. As a psychiatrist in general terms, but rather than specifically in relation to Colette House, I think Parminder and I can certainly take back a specific question to the trusts around residents known to us and see what information might be appropriate to share with this committee. But just in general terms, I think just to echo what I think VJ Taylor mentioned earlier on, around the approaches for patients with stabilizing severe and enduring mental illness. And it's certainly the case that in general terms, and again, this is not specifically related to Colette House, we have a number of patients who are care coordinated because of their level of specific needs, but another group of patients who will be receiving regular review under psychiatric care who don't have a named care coordinator. And that's what has traditionally been referred to as lead professional care. So there will be a professional involved in their regular review as they progress through their recovery towards being supported primarily through primary care. So I think that is likely to be the explanation, but we're very happy to give you a clear answer on the specific circumstances in Colette if we can.
That would be really helpful if we could just find some more information, if at all possible. We'd greatly appreciate that. So, Alan, I'm going to take that point forward, I think, because it may be that we could get a clearer answer, and then we'll share that with the committee when that comes in writing. Certainly in the minutes for the next meeting, but hopefully well before that. Do any colleagues have further questions? I'm not seeing anyone indicating, but in fairness to myself, I haven't scrolled all the way down my screen. So no, I'm still not seeing anyone indicating, but if you do, please shout. So otherwise, I'm going to use Chair's prerogative to ask a question myself, which is around, and this is a general question, so it may not be appropriate, but it's around the sharing of information with regards to what happened in this case, because reading the way the report is written, it seemed that some things were a surprise, or there was some information that was only learnt later during the development of this case. And I would suggest, I would hope that things have moved on in the time frame between this dreadful incident and where we are now. But I just wondered if colleagues could speak about how information is shared between the various agencies and organisations that you're all a part of with regard to the care of both the patients who are in Colette House and the staff who are working at Colette House, and how that relationship works, and hopefully how we've improved. So I don't know, Kerry, would you like to? Yeah, I can see your hand, but I can't see you, Kerry. So yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. As Ian mentioned earlier, we now have a clear programme for reviewing all the 117 eligible customers and patients within Ealing. There's something that Ian and I have been working very closely on for at least the last, I think it's probably the last 18 months, to ensure we've got a clear programme of reviews for people in receipt of 117 aftercare. We communicate regularly and work very closely within the council and the mental health trust, because we've got an integrated community mental health team. So there's strong discussions and information sharing between social work staff and nursing staff around individual cases. Staff use shared systems for sharing data and information. In terms of your point, Chair, with regards to the support to Colette House and to other providers, we'll certainly work from a council perspective, and with the CCG we have an integrated commissioning team who have oversight of the contracts where we've joint commissioned providers and services, and we work very closely with Nehar and colleagues at the CCG with regard to those contracts.
Sure. I don't know if Ian and Parminder and Chris, possibly any of you want to add anything, or is that sufficient?
I just wanted to add in terms of the forensic specialist team in the community, and there is an agreement of, so there's been extra funding in that, so they have a larger team there, so it helps in terms of providing 24/7 information support, and there is a clear plan where people that are under service users that are under our service, the care plans and risk assessments are shared with the accommodation, so there is that information sharing agreement. And then their risk assessments, as I said, they're reviewed. So just wanted to add that. Thanks.
Yeah, that sounds excellent. Ian, was there anything you wanted to add? I can see you nodding. I didn't know whether you wanted to.
No, I'm agree with everything that Kerry was saying and Parminder was saying there.
Okay, lovely. Well, look, that seems to be the end of the members' questions. What I have said to members is they can write to me with further comments or questions that we can take up after the meeting. What we're asked to do is take on board the report, comment and make recommendations. So notwithstanding what we've spoken about, I think the things to note are obviously how tragic this case is, but also to note the progress that has been made and spoken about this evening by representatives of each of the agencies. So I think Councillor Burke has raised the idea that we would take another check on this, within a period of time, 6 months to a year. I think we can work out precisely when that would be, but it would be useful to be able to check on the progress of and just the general condition and performance of the service, and if there are any problems. I think that would be a very reasonable and appropriate course of action. And then just around as well the sort of ongoing analysis of the service and looking at the improvements that you've all spoken about, the kind of improvements that Kerry and Ian have talked about, and also Parminder and Chris as well. So if we look to have a brief update in, say, 6 months to a year's time, but that will be scheduled in with all of you in advance so that we can come up with a report that's worth further scrutiny. And then I'd just like to thank you all for your participation this evening, because clearly we've waited some time for this report, and it's necessary that we look at this and move forward. So thank you very much, and keep up the good work.
Thank you, Chair.
Everybody. Thank you, Kerry. Thank you, Pominda. Thank you, Ian. And thank you, Chris. So our next item is the set of Health Watch Ealing reports, which we regularly take, and we've been a bit lax in terms of which meetings they've come to. There are two cover reports this evening for covering two different quarters. Matthew is here from Health Watch, and I think Matthew is going to provide an overview of both of those reports and then take questions. Are you ready to go, Matthew?
I am, yes. Thank you.
Fantastic.
How would you like me to do it? Should I present on our first report and then take questions on that and then move on to the next one? Is that easier?
Yeah, I think that would make sense, unless you feel that there are things in both reports that are pertinent and you want to highlight them immediately. But if you want to
well, maybe I could do that at the end and we can separate them first off.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Okay, lovely.
Am I able to share my screen just to
yeah, you should be able to. So if you have a go, and then we can tell you whether it's worked.
I think the host needs to enable me.
And who is the host? Is it me or is it Anna?
Anna Marie, I believe.
Anna, can you help me out here?
I can try. Hold on a second. Sorry.
Let's see.
No, I'm sorry. I can't do
okay.
that. If you want to start speaking, Kerry, and what I'll do is I'll try and pull it up and show it on my screen as you go along.
Matthew, so if you want to start, and Anna, what Anna's going to do is see if she can do it, because we can't seem to get your screen up at the moment.
I think there should be an option at the bottom of the screen where you can enable people to share their screen. Might be security, I believe.
I'm just going to have a look and see if it's in participants. I'll tell you what, Matthew, if you want to start talking through
of course,
your reports, and we'll see if we can do this as you go, if that's okay.
Sure. Okay, so the first report that I'd like to speak on is our patient experience report from Q1. So this covers the period of April to June. We obviously had to swiftly adapt to a new data collection process. As a result of the pandemic and as a result of this adaptation, we had a reduced target of 300 reviews to collect for the quarter. And we managed to hit this. We got 306 reviews in total. Overall, we had 74%, 22% negative. The negative largely focused on administrative issues at GP surgeries, and this included things like fantastic. I
think we've got we've got it's coming through now on Anna Marie's screen. So I hope your points will be illustrated now. Sorry, go ahead.
No problem. If I could just ask you to move on to the next slide. Thank you, Anna Marie. So as you can see here, we have the breakdown of the reviews and where they pertain to, what services. So as I said, the negativity focused largely on administrative issues. So this was focused on GP surgeries, as you can see in the top figure, but also around pharmacies, mainly with repeat prescriptions. There were no significant bits of feedback that were negative in sentiment towards hospital operations. So this kind of showed the divide, I guess, and the impact that COVID had caused on primary care services. The issue with this report was obviously that we weren't collecting enough data to really confirm these findings. We usually bring in about 1,200 reviews, and this was obviously drastically reduced during this time. As a result of which, those who have read the report will see that it's been caveated a number of times just to make sure that people understand this is very much a standalone report, and it should be viewed within the context of COVID and not indicative of Health Watch performance necessarily. So while there weren't that many recommendations to make from the Q1 report, it was an opportunity for us to learn how to further adapt to this way of working. Anna Maria, if I could just ask you to move on to the next slide. So as you can see here, we worked strongly internally to understand how we could improve our own performance. This took the shape of recruiting more volunteers, training new and current volunteers in direct contact methods, and also learning from neighbouring health watches as to how they were collecting patient experience during this time. And then we had some slightly more long-term goals. So this was further clarification around the findings for the next report. This was understanding how the COVID pandemic was impacting Ealing residents, and we were looking to conduct some annual reviews as well on primary care access and hospital access. So that kind of provides a breakdown of what actions and recommendations we were taking. And then what I just wanted to do on the next slide is provide you with a bit of an informal update on our Q2 report, because I think it's really useful to compare this quarter's report to Q1, just to understand how we implemented that training and took our actions forward. So as you can see here, we managed to collect 1,000 reviews, which was our target for Q2. So this was significantly increased from Q1. But interestingly, positive sentiment was largely the same at 76%. This quarterly report seemed to confirm some of the findings that we found in Q1, but also raised issues with staff attitudes. This was mainly seen in GP surgeries as well as some other primary care services as well. And experience of treatment started to creep up in negativity, which is something that is going to come out in the next report, which I'll formally present on at some stage. But this just provides you an overview, both figures 3 and 4, of how we were collecting more data overall, but also more data for specific service categories. And from this quarterly report moving on, we're going to start to look at how we can extrapolate bits of data on specific service categories and understand how we can continue to hear from marginalized populations in particular as we move out of the lockdown and restrictions ease. So those are the 2 quarterly reports. So if I'm able to stop and take any questions, then that would be great.
Yeah, okay, so excellent. I was just going to ask you to do that, Anna, so that's marvellous. Right, does anybody, I have some questions, but does anyone else have questions first? Any other panel members have questions on the Health Watch quarterly reports? If they could indicate, and if I could find my participants, I can go to them. I can't see anyone indicating that. I'm going to use the chair's prerogative, Matthew, to ask a couple of questions on just if you could talk about how you managed to up the level of responses and what forms those responses took, because clearly you would have been unable to do the sort of things, or some of the sort of things, that historically Health Watch would do to gather the data. And then you also mentioned about speaking to other local health watches about what they were doing and their experience. And I just wondered if you could speak about whether that was successful, if there were things that you took on board that are now part of the work of the Ealing Health Watch.
Of course, yeah. So to your first point, this was very much down to understanding where we could pick up on. Obviously, there were a whole host of people wanting to volunteer during this time, so we were fortunate enough to bring on a couple of extra volunteers. Then we wanted to look at how we could really train volunteers as a collective rather than individually. So we took on some training regimes with our patient experience officer, Stuart. What he did was enable people to understand how he would collect reviews via direct contact, via the telephone, and showed them a particular technique where you would move from one feedback into another. So if you were gathering feedback for a GP service, you would kind of seamlessly move into whether there were any feedbacks for dentists, opticians, hospitals, etc. And before you know it, you've got a couple of so that was one way of doing it. Another way was setting targets for volunteers as well. In the past, we've kind of asked volunteers to do as much as they can in the time that they provide. But it was my understanding that they were putting in their time to help Healthwatch Ealing. Therefore, we need to help them get as much out of the experience as possible. And I think this is where the targets came in. So if people were operating on kind of getting 4 or 5 reviews a week, we would say to them, we think they're fully capable of getting 6 or 7 reviews. How do you feel? And their confidence would obviously skyrocket once they were able to hit those numbers. And it was a kind of, it was a give and take, if you will, because we were providing them with the opportunity to upskill, and we were getting the patient experience. To your second point as well, we have a lot of similarities in terms of the patients we hear and Hammersmith and Fulham. And so I think a lot of the work they were doing, we were able to implement in Ealing as well. This included things like focus groups and webinars, working with the voluntary sector to understand how we could distribute our patient experience surveys through them, and just thinking of different ways in which we could get out to the community. So we were able to do this as well, and slowly but surely move things online. So this ended up being a big help alongside the direct telephone contact.
Sure. Okay. Well, look, that's really interesting to hear how those ideas have developed. And also, I would say, in the time that I've been chair, it's almost coincided with the growth of Healthwatch from its very infancy, and quite a lot of scepticism, some of it my own to begin with, about how Healthwatch was going to tackle some of these tasks. But it's really pleasing to see that you're able to carry out this sort of analysis and provide this sort of data and give a snapshot of performance locally. And I do think the volunteers need to be commended for their hard work in this very difficult time. Right, I've got some other questions now, so I'll shut up. Burke wants to ask a question, so Councillor Burke, over to you.
Yeah, a couple of questions from me. One is just over all of your reports. One of the things that interests me is whether you picked up anything about the virtual nature of activity now, because obviously that's been a massive shift, and whether that's something, well, you know, people are finding okay, because I thought it was actually amazingly positive, the responses around GPs, and given that most of them are virtual. So anything you've got deeper on that would be interesting. And secondly, just carrying on from Dan's questions, really is in terms of really kind of making sure that you get to the groups that we need to, especially around some of the things we now know about COVID and the groups that are more likely, older people, etc., etc. Are there any groups that you feel that you really weren't getting to, and that, you know, for future reference, that you'll want to follow up?
Yeah, you've essentially outlined 2 of our limitations, so that's good. First and foremost, with the digital side of things, it should really be said that we've been kind of limited in terms of our outreach, obviously, and this has meant that this could have affected the data. What we have seen, and what I'll show you in the COVID report next, is that although the digital methods have received a high uptake, they're still receiving a mixed response in terms of how well people are able to use them. A number of situations have occurred where people haven't been able to access their repeat prescriptions, haven't been able to access their GP surgery appointments, and particularly with people with long-term conditions or ongoing situations that they need regular contact with a GP surgery about, they found it hard to find appointment slots online and stick to this kind of virtual by default method. Particular concern around kind of things that needs some sort of physical assessment. So that is something going forward that hopefully we can address, particularly by working with the voluntary sector to understand how we can get to these people more, whether it's hard copy surveys, whether it's focus groups, just to understand how we can speak to people who may not be as digitally competent.
Can I come back on that?
Yeah,
okay?
Just in a second.
Oh, sorry. Do you want to finish it? No, it's just on that very specific point, because one of the things that struck me through COVID that has been amazing has been the residence groups. And I just wonder whether that's, an alternative way of doing things in terms of, and the distribution networks. Again, you've probably tapped into this, that, that have been distributing food, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So just, anyway, sorry to interrupt you.
No problem at all. And that's a good point, actually, because we did start working with Ealing Food Bank on a trial basis, distributing hard copies with people's food packages. So we're actually just seeing how that goes at the moment, and then hopefully we can expand into other communities as well. Onto your other point, that leads quite nicely on, actually, because there are a number of marginalized populations that we want to start hearing from that we aren't necessarily at the moment. If you look at the breakdown of the demographic in the report, you can see that it is quite heavily weighted towards the white population. So naturally, we need to be hearing from these communities that that aren't necessarily getting as a result. So to hear from them is essential. We also need to start to hear from younger people as well, because the age is skewed towards middle age and older age. So those are two of the main points that we're going to be tackling in 2020-2021 year. On top of that, we want to hear from the Polish community more, and we want to hear from people in residential care homes more. So those are the 4 areas that we want to tackle next year, obviously, with restrictions permitting.
If I'm allowed to reply, Dan, I think it's interesting because I think there'll be a lot of work going on. You've targeted, probably except for the younger people, all the, the groups around vaccination. Mm-hmm. So, and I think there's going to be a lot of work going on around that. So it'd be great again, and I know you're linked into this, if you could join in with some of the hospital trusts and how they're trying to get access into those different groups. So there might be some mileage there.
That's a very valid point. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Chris, did you want to come in on that point? I would imagine.
It was exactly on that point, and actually Matt and I are meeting next week, and I hope that we'd be able to explore some of the ways that we can try to get feedback from some of the groups that Ealing Community Partners and the Mental Health Trust support. That's particularly pertinent probably around the residential home work, given that we are the primary care and various other care provider for that population. But we hopefully Matt and I will be able to feedback at a future meeting.
Fantastic. And just on some of those difficult to reach groups or the groups that you want to reach more, just a couple of ideas. I don't know whether it'd be appropriate, but Councillor Burke discussing or liaising with residents groups. I can certainly ask the council's neighbourhood governance and community engagement if they could supply you with the list of residents groups who form the council statutory consultees. They may be able to give you ways into their membership groups, and at least be able to circulate some contact details for yourselves for people to get into touch in particular areas of the borough where you're looking at. And I'm sure we can have a word with the relevant council officers with regards to social care as well. If there are residential homes that the council will have engagement with, where we can assist there. So I'll certainly try and make those two offers, and if I don't come back to you, nudge me about it, and we'll work something out. Councillor Raza, I haven't forgotten you. I'm coming to you now.
Matt's actually touched on what I was going to ask in the first place. So my question was around what are you doing to engage the BAME population? Not that we like the words BAME, but for want of a better phrase, it kind of nicely encompasses everything. So yeah, working with the sort of more at risk groups that Councillor Burke was talking about. That was the blindingly obvious sort of thing from that report that I thought was quite a bit worrying, considering that those are the at-risk groups. What are we going to be doing to get in touch with them? Might I suggest that we already have a call with, I think it's religious groups, with the council when we have a COVID update, so it might be worth possibly plugging into mosques and temples and sort of groups that are a bit more diverse, and you might have a wider sort of range of people coming to you if that's that you were going at it from different community groups rather than just residential groups, because again we find a lot of the people who come to residential groups tend to be middle-aged and white. So we're casting a wider net by tapping the right groups, which I think, you know, we as the council suffer quite badly from managing to do properly too. So I think there's a learning in this for all sort of groups who are trying to find out more of what's happening on the ground, is that we have to be better at communicating with particular parts of our community that we're just not hitting. I have a lot of Eastern European communities in my ward, and you know, not all of them are Polish, and there's nuance, and there's things that we need to be definitely a bit more sensitive about when we're casting our net, which is also another thing that I think we need to take on board, that with scant resources we obviously overlook a lot of these things, but they're very important to get the nuance and get that correct. Otherwise the data, lovely though it is, might be a bit skewed.
Matt, do you want to come back?
Absolutely, yeah. This is a really valid point, and I'm glad you brought it up, because we're in the process of writing our proposal for our inequalities project, which is actually based off of the COVID-19 report. But essentially the proposal is to conduct a research project that understands how digital exclusion and social isolation have affected BME populations. And I was trying to think of ways in which, apart from community centres, we could contact these populations. So if we were able to go through these religious groups and speak with them and understand how we could work with them, then I think that would be amazing.
So I think it's
I think that's one way we could help. Sorry, I was just going to say that there's already a group that's set up by the council, so I'm quite certain that through Dan we can kind of possibly put you in touch with them with the outreach, and that might be able to be something that you could speak about on their call.
Absolutely.
So I think it's a chief executive's initiative, that. So what I will, so I'm told, I may not be correct, but what I will do is I will write to the chief executive referencing this very discussion and saying that Healthwatch would like to be involved in that, and then at least, Matt, you can have access to the faith leaders.
Also, we have the tasking groups that we're currently doing in sort of towns. That might be another place where Healthwatch could have a bit of a input, even if you just, you know, speak about what you want to do. Other groups that are present at those meetings can pick it up from there too.
Yeah, so I think that's being run by, Aisha, correct me if I'm wrong, the ward forum coordinators. In the various different wards. So if we can get in touch with them and reference
It might even go into your email to Paul. The chief exec could possibly direct it.
I think it's all cut to doing it. Yeah, quite. Yeah. So Matt, would you like to take us through the COVID, because this all leads quite nicely onto the COVID report? Would you like to try and do that now? And Anna, if I could ask you to see if you could share the COVID report. Oh, you're doing it. Oh, this is what we call teamwork. Matt, take it away when you're ready.
Sure thing. If you could just go on to, yeah, perfect. So our COVID-19 impact survey took place across May to June, and it really looked at 4 key areas. So it was looking at who is actually at high risk, the access to care during this time, access to information, and residents' mental health and well-being. We managed to collect feedback from 467 residents of Ealing. And on the whole, the transition that primary care services and overall health and social care have had to go through appeared to meet the needs of the patient. This covered things like appointment time adjustments, conducting appointments over the phone or video call as opposed to physical appointments, and changes in service regarding other primary care services like opticians, pharmacies, etc. Overall, the level of communication regarding these changes was largely rated as good or excellent. So this clearly shows that there's room for improvement, but we'll come on to this later. And there were some instances that we have to take into account where the right substitution wasn't made. And this particularly focused on what I was saying earlier in the previous report presentation about when it's necessary to have a physical assessment and these assessments actually being moved to a digital platform and obviously not having the same outcomes that they would in a face-to-face appointment. There's also an indication that the changes that have been made to social care have not consistently met the needs. But this was an area in the report that received low feedback. So although we have some individual accounts of social care not meeting individuals' needs, we would need more information to confirm these findings. And overall, in terms of access to care, people seem to rely much more on friends or family for support, particularly those at high risk, than actually reaching out to any professional authorities or organisations. This is fairly natural in a time like this, obviously, but it does bring up some concerns, particularly as we move on in the report. I'll tell you about them, but one of the main things is people understanding the information around shielding and whether people are vulnerable or not. So if you're relying on friends and family and they don't have this understanding of the knowledge that's out there, it could throw up some potential issues. If we could just move to the next slide. Thank you very much. So the next focus was on access to information. And as you can see here, overall, people found it easy to access general information. Now, this is the kind of hands, face, space stuff that you see that's more of the general information about safety during COVID. Where we started to see a decline in this number was when people were trying to access information about specific topics. So this included things like where to get tested for COVID, how to manage long-term conditions during the pandemic, and also what to do if you're caring for somebody or in contact with somebody that's shielding or at high risk. Again, following on from this, and where the concern lies is that a smaller percentage of people actually found it easy to act on this information. So although they were taking the information in, and this pertains to the general information as well, they weren't necessarily able to act on it. So this is something that we would need to look into a bit more in terms of stakeholders as a whole, just to understand why people aren't necessarily able to act on these sorts of things. whether it's situational factors where they simply can't, or whether they haven't gained a complete understanding of the safety measures. Overall, individuals use a wide range of sources for their information. And if we were able to drill down further into the different age brackets, we could actually understand what age groups and what demographics we're using specific digital channels. And this could inform communication strategies as we move forward. If we could go on to the next slide, please. The third section we looked at was residents' mental health and well-being. As you can see, 78% of the residents that we received feedback from mentioned that the pandemic had impacted their mental health in some way. Obviously, this is unsurprising. But when we looked at where the sources were of this stress and consequent mental health and well-being insecurity, was the inability to access testing, was the restrictions in place around friends and family, and also an overall lack of awareness and sense of feeling forgotten by professional authorities during the pandemic. This particularly pertained to individuals with long-term conditions, and also, as we explored, was more likely to come up from people in BME populations and white ethnicities. There is some indication that an overall lack of awareness around what support there actually is for mental health services, either in the voluntary sector or the healthcare sector, could have contributed to this number as well. And I think going forward, one of the recommendations that we touch on later looks at how we can still support mental health services within the community. And this will be focused on how we can get the word out about their level of support for people. And if we could just go on to the next slide. Okay, so this section, I've labeled it health inequalities because it's looking at who is at high risk. And although this research project didn't set out to look at the inequalities between ethnicities, we uncovered a couple that are now going to act as the foundation for our next research project. In particular, we saw that there was a significant difference between the advice that people were receiving depending on their ethnicity. We also found that people from BME communities were more likely to be caring for someone in an informal or unpaid capacity. And when comparing the impact of COVID on people's mental health and well-being, BME communities seem to be significantly more impacted than white ethnicities. So this, as we go on, I'll tell you about this more in the recommendations, but this is really what we want to take forward as our next project and start to understand, in particular, these mental health insecurities within how they come about and what actions we can take in the short, medium and long term to alleviate these issues. If we could just go on to the next slide. So the more general recommendations from this COVID report is focusing on communication largely. We want to understand how we can take a more targeted approach to communication. This is both in the channels that we use and the information that we're distributing. This report has shown that what really needs to be done is a targeted approach to understand what communication specific populations need in order to support their own health and well-being during situations of isolation and lockdown. Understanding this will allow us to understand a bit more as well about how we can implement more strategically the digital first approach and when a physical appointment is necessary. And this applies across primary care services as a whole. And then, as I mentioned before, there should be particular focus on supporting mental health services within the community, particularly given the second wave, and we know the fallout that's going to come from this in terms of the impact that these lockdowns have had on people's mental health and well-being. We need to understand more about how we can support these community organisations and instill a sense of community in those particularly who have a sense of mistrust towards the NHS and primary care services, and have an overall sense of feeling forgotten as well. So this is part of the work that we want to take forward next year. And then if we could just go on to the final slide. Now, these are where we kind of want to hone in as an organisation and prioritise this particular action. What we want to do is we would like Healthwatch Ealing to kind of triangulate and spearhead an inequalities working group and call on partners throughout the borough, including local authorities, community sector organisations and the CCG, to really bring all of our findings together and start to conduct some more strategic research, whether this is focus groups, whether this is community outreach, or whether this is more quantitative research, to understand what actions we can take in the short, medium and long term. We've already started this ourselves by working of their report and to understand how ours marry with theirs and what we can do to take these actions forward. And this is the proposal I mentioned earlier regarding digital exclusion and social isolation. So this is something we're taking forward as an organisation. We're also thinking of new ways to implement innovative feedback mechanisms. Hopefully, we'll be able to conduct more face-to-face outreach, but we continue to think of things such as the food bank, resident groups, religious groups and things like that to understand how we can hear from more marginalised populations. And then finally, Healthwatch Ealing as an organisation needs to establish itself more within the community. And I think this will come with community organisations, with particular stakeholders, to understand how we can work more closely with them to hear the voices from these marginalised populations, and then how we can best act with the resources available to tackle the inequalities that we're seeing in health in general. And I believe that's it. So if there are any questions on the COVID report.
Sure, and Councillor Burke, I'm not sure it's a legacy hand. I'd imagine it's an actual hand. Yes, go for it, Councillor Burke.
The legacy hand, sorry. Yeah, I'll move that.
Oh, it is a legacy hand.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Well, let's see if Councillor Raz's hand is a legacy hand. Let's see whether...
No, mine wasn't a legacy hand.
Yeah, excellent. Go for it, Aisha.
Oh, here we go. We're on. Hey. Yes, the problem with comms is, I think, another one that's across the board. We struggle with it horribly at the council. Trying to get sort of public health messaging out has been, I think, a nightmare anyway. But reaching out to more sort of marginalised groups, I think, has become a lot harder because of languages, of digital inequalities. What are your possible future plans to kind of remedy that, other than sort of face-to-face? Would it include something like, I don't know, contacting things like community radio, community TV channels? I mean, I was amazed that my mum was watching some Indian channel and it had the most fantastic public health messaging with spliced together Bollywood films, and I thought, wow, this is amazing. And so she could tell me exactly what was going on with this like 3-minute film that just popped up. It might well be on YouTube somewhere, but whether someone of my mum's generation would be watching it or not would be completely I'm shocked at how we're not seeing anything on our sort of terrestrial TV channels. There's not very much out there. There's long-winded NHS sort of epic sort of films trying to get everybody to. It's so confusing that the messaging is lost in there. So I think you've totally hit the nail on the head where comms is key. But what are your possible avenues where you think that this is going to fly well? Because God knows we need all the pointers we can get to.
Yes, thank you. So you did touch on a couple there, and I've written down radio and TV, and I'll take them back because those are great suggestions. We're working, Your Voice, our umbrella organisation, is working to start to translate our patient experience surveys into, I believe it's the 6 main languages within the borough. So this is something that's been on the agenda for a while, and obviously this has accelerated the need for it, but we're also proactively pushing it forward as Healthwatch Ealing as well. We also had a meeting yesterday about how we could accelerate community champions, because this is something, again, that has been on the agenda, but whether it's capacity or whether it's another issue, it's kind of fallen by the wayside. And so I think we're going to be working with the voluntary sector and the CCG to understand how we can use community champions to get the word out, particularly around myth busting to do with COVID vaccinations and flu vaccinations. And then this is something we can take forward to ensure that Healthwatch is a more reputable name in these populations, and to really get the point across that we're representing their voice and we're here to help them have a voice in the decision-making process of the health sector. So those are kind of 2 of the key things that we're pushing forward on top of.
Bizarrely, a lot of people are still kind of phone based, so most people will have a smartphone. So what I'm finding is, like, my mum and her mates will talk to each other on WhatsApp, or they'll talk to each other via Facebook. And Facebook's community groups or the sort of neighborhood pages are invaluable. I mean, it's word spreads like wildfire. The minute it pops up on one of those, everyone's like, oh yeah, I saw that, and everybody gets it. So it's social, it's kind of digital access, but via phone. So it's not like a websitey thing, because I don't think my mum would know how to do a Google search if you asked her to. But they have the Facebook thing and they know how that works, or they have WhatsApp and they know how that works. And I think that happens quite regularly in different communities where everybody has a smartphone. So anything that could be sort of pushed out through those channels, I think would do the job pretty well as well. It's just a minefield because we're struggling with the same, where sort of door-to-door things come through the letterbox, and it told everybody to go to a website which was completely lost on everyone. So I mean, it's little cock-ups like that we can't afford to keep making, and we sort of need to kind of get all our eggs together in that comms basket and sort it out. But thanks for that.
No problem.
Okay, Kerry, did you want to come in, or am I imagining that?
You're not imagining it, Councillor Crawford.
Yeah, go for it, Kerry.
Councillor Rye led a mental health summit with us earlier in the autumn, and one of the learning points from that was that the written word is an important way for us to reach certain individuals and communities, and we're working with mental health providers in the borough to try and have a consistent message through newsletters, etc. They've got some really good interactive examples where people are sharing information via the newsletter. So just wanted to share that we shouldn't forget the written word and the benefits.
Yeah, sure. No, thank you, Kerry. Councillor Burke, did you want to come in this
time?
Sorry, I thought you did. Yeah, go for it.
No, I just remembered what I wanted to say. It was really a query, following on a bit from Aisha's point as well, about I come across Healthwatch in all sorts of different working environments for me. And, Healthwatch are really well positioned, I think, to represent people. I just wondered what you do behind the scenes to join up that, and comms would be one example of it. But I'm just kind of think of all the places where I see Health Watch in hospitals, etc., and the access you can gain to communities that way. And actually these days, like linking that with outpatients through to GPs, etc. As I say, it's actually where people physically are, not just where you're sending things out to them. So what opportunities, long-winded way of asking the question, what opportunities are there for you in different Health Watch environments to join up and actually kind of make the most of the sum of your parts?
I think it largely boils down to the relationships that we're making within the community sector. This is something that needs specific attention moving forward, because a few of them, at least that I've come across in the 3 months that I've been with Health Watch Ealing, have really dropped off. And whether that's to do with COVID or whether that's to do with something else, it's something that needs to be addressed. So I think that is the most important next step to take, is to build these relationships again, and bring the name to the forefront of the attention when people are thinking about relaying their experiences and their opinions of the health sector. Aside from that, I think we just need to continue thinking of innovative ways of engaging with the community. And obviously things have to be slightly adapted at this stage, but hopefully moving forward, we can start to think about more ways in which we can bring on volunteers to Health Watch Ealing to allow us to have a bigger capacity to do things like reaching out to children and young people and their parents and carers, or to do things like speak to residents of care homes. It's really a relationship and capacity balance that we need to find, I think.
Okay, Aisha, your hand is still up, but I don't know whether it's... No? Okay, now, well, it's not anymore, don't worry. Excellent. We just cracked the technology. Look, I think it's really useful having that broader discussion that sort of broadened out a little bit from just the statistics that are in the reports, because I think both the councillors who've asked questions have identified that it's not just Health Watch who are going to struggle to reach different sections of the community or to get to the areas where you need to go. It's everybody, and the pandemic makes it all the more difficult to ask the questions that you need to ask and get the answers that you need, and maintain that longer term relationships which you just touched on, man. So look, I would say we want to be as supportive as possible, and I absolutely mean what I said earlier on, which is at the very beginning when they told me about what Health Watch was supposed to do and it was coming in with the Health and Social Care Act. I saw Alan smiling earlier when I said this, because I think he knows what I meant. I was very sceptical about the powers that you were given and your ability to get yourself into that space and be effective. But I have to say, locally, and it's not just here, it's in a lot of other places as well, you've done very well at activating that patient voice and using the access that you have that other people don't to generate results. So look, that's really encouraging. We want to support you as much as possible. The only thing I would say in regard to this last one is you talked about working with the food bank. The Ealing Community Transport that Anna Whitty, who's still here, helps to run. It has been doing these deliveries along with the food bank, but their own deliveries as well. They have a massive network of carers and supporters and delivery drivers and individuals. And I've just realised I'm talking about this, and Anna is probably much more appropriate to speak about this. She's shaking her head. But I just think if you haven't tapped into the Ealing Community Transport resource, if you guys have not had a meeting, that would be really useful, I think, on both of your parts, just to be able to swap notes and talk about routes into different communities. Anna, did you want to talk a little bit about Ealing Community Transport? You should really. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, you've been very articulate in doing it on our behalf. So thank you, Chair. But Matt, we we used to spend a lot of time talking with Jamie previously, and she was aware of what we do. But not only do we do sort of general social reason transport, but we also provide transport to GPs. And Neha's now nodding her head, but that's an area that we're really proud of, and in particular because it provides confidence to patients who haven't been out for a long time, who then go on to use our other transport for social purposes.
Right.
And it's all about the loneliness and isolation that's really important for us. And it's particularly important now that so many people we come across who haven't been out for months and months. And social prescribing is a big deal, and Councillor Crawford knows that I feel strongly about it. And as chair, I asked him whether social prescribing could be reviewed on this panel, because I personally believe, and through my experience, that going out, doing things, the social prescribing model, and Chris Hilton, he's another one that I've had long chats with about this. It's really critical for getting these group of people out of their homes. And only last week, when I saw a neighbour that she asked me to sign something, that's why I had to go into her house. And I was trying to persuade her to use the transport. And she's now well into her 80s. And it was somebody's confidence that has disintegrated in front of my eyes on my street. And I'm sure my neighbour's not the only one. And,
yeah, absolutely.
And I'm sorry I've hijacked this.
No, that's exactly what I wanted you to do.
Yeah, but it's you know, we cannot just sit and watch this happening.
No.
To a really important group of people, and you know, we're vaccinating them first, and we've got to get them out of their homes first as well.
Definitely, and that's part of the that should follow the public health advice as well. But I think in the context of the Health Watch relationship, there could be a really interesting bit of joint working potentially between Ealing Community Transport and Health Watch. And if we haven't done it already, we should try and restart it now, because I think you may be able to give Matt some access to some of the people whom he's trying to find at the moment. So if we can make that happen, that'd be great. But look, I'll take your wider point, Anna, and we'll come into the work programme in a minute, but I will take it back to our officers to see if we can squeeze it in by the end of the year on social prescribing. Just to wrap this up, unless colleagues have any other questions, I would like to thank Matt for his time, his persistence in terms of carrying out this work at probably the most difficult time that you've had to, or any of your colleagues have had to undertake any research, and particularly for hitting those very ambitious targets that you set yourselves. That's really impressive. And, you know, just to say from the panel's perspective and the council's perspective, we really value the Health Watch voice, and we'd like to work with you to spread that influence that you have even wider if possible. So thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for your input as well. It's really helpful.
So, and please don't be afraid to email us or come back to us with an ask about some of the things that we've talked about tonight. We might not be the right person to activate it, but I'm sure we can pass you on to somebody who will be better placed. So yeah, please don't be a stranger in coming forward. So thank you, Matt, for that. The last two items that we have to deal with should be fairly straightforward, guys. The first is the work programme, which details some of the things we will be looking at. The next meeting in, I want to say February, but I want to check that I'm correct. Yes, unbelievably, it is February. Is going to deal with an update on a previous item on adult social care, which we'd agreed would come back to the panel because we had quite a few questions. And I hope I'm not surprising Kerry at this point with that, because his name is down for that item. And then we're going to look at primary care and out of hospital services, which we are hoping to look at. That is sort of dependent on how our friends in the NHS are progressing with the other things that they need to do. And we're totally cognizant of that. So I will provide councillors and colleagues with an update on where we are well in advance of the next meeting. But that is the next meeting on the 10th of February 2021. Can I thank you all for your participation this evening? I thought both of our items generated a lot of discussion and were very interesting, and I know that a lot of our colleagues have many other pressing things that they need to deal with almost simultaneously at the moment. So thank you so much, everybody. Please continue to stay safe and well, and I will be in touch with you all soon and hopefully see you all soon. So take care. Thank you very much, everyone.